Hey everybody, welcome to Cofutures. I am here today at Mana Contemporary, which is awesome, as you can see. And I'm here to interview Anneli Goeller, who's a resident here, and I'm really excited and looking forward to this interview. So let's go upstairs. Hi, could you tell us who you are, where we are, and what you do?
Yeah, I'm Anneli Goeller. We are here in my shared studio at Mana Contemporary as part of the new media program residency.
What inspires you these days?
I think a lot of what inspires me is just existing in the virtual world. And in my work, I create 3D avatars of myself. So just spending time being able to like manipulate and also just get this like 3D image of my own self and body. It's kind of this like out of body experience. And so I think just spending time in the software and in 3D space is like what inspires the work itself.
What are you reading or watching that you think others would benefit from knowing about?
I have been reading the work of Sherry Turkle. So she writes about the internet and the effect being on the internet and using technology affects us over time. And so some of her first writings are from the 90s, and she's written things continually up till recently. So I find it interesting to see her standpoint when she was first writing about this as opposed to now and how it's changed. I think it speaks to how our conception of the internet has changed and our expectations. Originally, everyone was pretty optimistic about the possibilities of the internet, and now I would say as it's becoming more corporate and there's less possibilities of freedom and users being able to control their own experience online, it's gotten much more restrictive, and it seems like everyone has a pessimistic view about it. So that's something I'm always thinking about. And I personally have been going on deviantart.com, which is like an old school website for sharing digital art. And a lot of people would post their MySpace layouts in like 2004 to 2006. So a lot of my visual inspiration comes from that, and just like browsing through what the internet used to look like.
Why is customization important to you?
The fact that most of our internet time now is spent on just a few websites that are owned by huge corporations, Instagram and Facebook being one corporation, it's limiting in the creative agency you have for posting, but also just in censorship and like abiding by their heteronormative community standards and white supremacist community standards. It's just a totally different space that we exist in online. So I think back to MySpace days where I was like a 12-year-old learning how to use HTML just to create my own customized MySpace page. I think that was just like so much more possibility, and it just kind of shows everyone had more of a stake in what they're able to post.
How do you think about the relationships between your digital projects and your physical installations?
The interaction between my digital and physical spaces has a lot to do with the fact that it's all being created and sourced in the virtual world. And so when I first started working digitally, I was always questioned as to like how or why do I not bring my work into the physical space? And I never wanted my solution to be just that, to be just a solution, because I think um, artwork and imagery on a screen is just as meaningful as physical objects. And I think that we all have, like most of our daily life is now just in virtual space. So I don't think it's the only way to create an immersive experience. I don't think the only way to do that is to create physical objects. So I never wanted to try to just uh, do it for the sake of having an object or for trying to create almost like a mimic of what the virtual experience is like. So I came to a point where working in Maya, I was able to use the software to create 3D objects that could then be like taken directly from the software into the physical world. And for me, that was exciting, like being able to 3D print, being able to take these elements of my virtual world that I'm creating and have them become physical in this like one-to-one process was the part where then I could be excited about having physical objects. Mm-hmm. So like jacquard weaving was able to take this 3D image I created, turn the pixels into weave structures, and then weave it. And so that, to me, that process made a lot of sense. Mm-hmm. And then being able to take this like heart-shaped structure that I made using like an old MySpace layout in Maya and turning it into a sewing pattern and then creating furniture from that. Mm-hmm. Like those processes made more sense to me than just trying to make physical objects that kind of like mimic what we think the internet is like. Mm-hmm. So. Yeah.
What are some of your biggest takeaways after having audience members interact with your work?
So once I've had audience members interact with my work, I think particularly for the theme of some of my work having to do with PTSD and trauma was not only important, but actually pretty like a potential for being triggering for me as the artist. Just like taking this content that's really personal and hard for me to grapple with, and then having visitors be able to like hear that, but also like interact with my augmented reality avatar in that context. I think it was important for me to kind of like frame the experience and like control the narrative. So in one way, it helped me like structure how I want people to know about these events, and almost like by creating an installation that is about my own trauma, it's like a way to control how people think about it, or like kind of create an experience that confronts people with it when they wouldn't necessarily have to grapple with that difficult information. But it also poses challenges because I never want to like create a trigger for someone else. So I've been really trying to figure out the best ways to include trigger warnings in the work itself so that people like right away can be aware of it, and also have it be part of the work so that people who aren't sensitive to triggers can like have to think about it and maybe be more aware of using trigger warnings and content warnings in their own work.
What does personhood mean to you?
For me, personhood is kind of a complicated concept because I think digital avatars and artificial intelligence have their own sense of personhood, and that's one of the things I propose in my own work, and also um, interacting with artificial intelligence. It's hard to ignore the like human aspects, especially once you keep adding more source material to their like knowledge base. And so I think, and then also working with scanned bodies, um, I think this idea that we have that physical humans are completely separate and a different and have different rights than digital avatars and artificial intelligence and scanned bodies is like a concept that's gonna soon have to change as we keep creating artificial intelligence. And so I think also the more we take images of ourselves and have these online personas, I think our sense of personhood gets um, maybe like split up, or we have these, whether we are aware of it or not, we have many different personas based on the platforms we use or how we portray ourselves online. So I think the definition of personhood is changing the more dependent we are on the internet and social media.
As an artist, you have multiple online personas. What is that process like, and how does it feel to be multiple people?
Yes. So having multiple selves online can be, sometimes it's difficult to always feel like I'm performing, but I think it's something that everyone does even if they're not conscious of it. So a lot of my practice, even from years ago, from the beginning, once I started being interested in like self images and taking selfies, had to do with just being more conscious of my online performance and taking ownership of it, and almost like using it as a medium itself. Like, if this is something we all have to do to exist in this society, especially as artists, we all have to have this online presence. Why not make that the work itself, or like use that as a medium, as like a creative medium? But it does get confusing to, and like hard to judge where the boundaries of my personal life begins and my online personas begin and end, because I'm not sure that there are those boundaries anymore. Yeah. Definitely having an avatar of myself, so having like a second self. It started just as like taking this idea of a selfie and turning it into first 3D scan, so like 3D selfie, and then artificial intelligence. So like a basically I'm proposing that it's a digital consciousness, so it's like a online hub of consciousness that I'm creating. I think in one way it's like this ideal of creating like an immortal self that will live as long as the data can survive. But specifically with working with PTSD and trauma, it was a way to engage with that trauma, almost like if you're able to have a conversation with yourself about something that's really hard to talk about or think about, and something that causes disassociation. So, how can I take control of that disassociation and disassociate on my own terms? And having this avatar is almost like the visual manifestation of what disassociation feels like. So being able to have that experience where you're looking down at yourself, but I'm purposely creating that. So now I'm able to like manipulate it and push the boundaries of it in a way that's safer than just having PTSD flashbacks in a setting that is not safe to be out of body. So it's almost like taking symptoms of PTSD that are usually considered dangerous and harmful, and using them as like a sense of possibility and just like a way to dissect my thoughts and my trauma memories. So I think I'm almost saying that disassociation is not necessarily a bad thing. It's just more about the like setting that you're in. So if I'm in this virtual world, then I'm able to find like the good parts of disassociation.
What is most exciting for you right now for the future of queer artistic practice in the digital space?
So I think one of the most exciting things about working as a queer artist in virtual space is that it offers modes of expression and existence that are really limited by the physical world. So by having this portal and digital persona, I'm able to express my queerness in a way that is somewhat safer from the heteronormative patriarchal world. And some ways I'm able to do that have to do with like 3D software itself. Like I can have my digital avatar, and I can create any like movements or modifications to that avatar that I want without having to face the ramifications of existing as a queer body in physical society.
So I'm going to say a couple words, and I would love for you to respond to them with whatever comes to your mind right off the top of your head. MySpace.
MySpace was, I think, like a turning point in the way we existed online. And for me, it was the last positive social media that existed.
Algorithmic selves.
Being able to create duplicates of oneself, infinite duplicates of oneself. That's what I have to say about that.
Story.
Wow, thinking of story, I just automatically think of Instagram stories at this point, and that's kind of sad that story has potentially lost its original meaning. like story, you would think I would start thinking about narratives, but instead I just think about Instagram.
We just finished our interview, which was awesome. Thank you, Anneli.
Thank you.
And yeah, we'll see you later.